everybody. Thanks so much for joining us right here on The Right View. Tonight, we are joined by candidate for Congress in her home state of Illinois, Catalina Lauf. Catalina, welcome to The Right View. I think the first time people were maybe introduced to you was the Republican National Convention last year. You and your sister were in a video together. And now you have decided to run for Congress. That's kind of a big leap. How did this all come about? Tell me why you decided to run, and were you influenced at all by being part of the convention?
Yes, first of all, it's an honor to be on with you. And, you know, it really had an impact on my decision to run. You know, I'm a former political appointee with the Trump administration, worked at the Department of Commerce, and was able to really come out in the conservative media as the anti-AOC because of being a young voice, a young millennial woman that wanted to fight against these really radical ideologies that are taking over our country. And that convention slot was not only super impactful for my sister and I to be able to tell our story that we're not the stereotypical conservatives, but also tell our story about how the Trump administration, his Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, pro-growth economic policies, and the America First agenda were really able to help companies like the one that my sister and I have, and really support the values of the American dream that we all love our country for. My mother came here from Central America, and we really wanted to talk about the story of how precious this country is and why it's so necessary to preserve our ideals here.
Gosh, it's so true. And it feels like that convention was so long ago. It turns out it was just over a year ago, but it feels like a world ago, because really, Catalina, so much has happened to our country in that time. I mean, you just referenced the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. My goodness, what a change we had from a president who actually put America and Americans first, who actually was creating jobs, bringing manufacturing back to this country, incentivizing small business growth, and all of the great things President Trump did, to who we've got in office right now. I mean, even realizes sometimes that he's president, which it's very questionable whether or not he does. Joe Biden is killing the American dream every single day. How has it been for you? Do you still have your business? What is your business?
Yes, Lara, you're absolutely right. And when you bring up manufacturing, that is such a pain point for us. My sister and I have a company that is children nutraceuticals. So we help kids with constipation, gut health, and we created a formula to help kids.
God, I could have used you around my house, but yeah. Go ahead, we'll get there.
And it's called Begin Health, and we were a startup. And under the Trump administration, we were able to really get off the ground. You know, it's something that started from our kitchen table, and we've been able to see so much growth. But ultimately, under this administration, the manufacturing issues, the labor shortages that we're seeing, we can't get product at all half the time because of everything that's going on from an economic perspective. So it really does have an impact. If we can't get our product out, we are not doing our job for our customers and our people that really believe in what we're doing, and we're helping kids in a healthful way. And people really rely on our product. And under this administration, it has been a mess, not only with the labor shortages, but also the increase in prices, the lack of innovation, the regulations that are put on industries all across the board is not conducive to companies at all, small, medium to large. So we're really hoping that we get better representation, better policies out there, not only in Congress, but also ultimately in the presidency, because it really impacts people all across the country, the American worker, the American family, and businesses like ours.
Yeah, my parents are small business owners. They have been since I was a kid. They own a car wash in Wilmington, North Carolina. And for the first time in over 20 plus years, maybe almost 25 years that they have had this car wash, a couple of weeks ago, Catalina, they had to close down because they did not have enough workers to open the car wash. Thanks to the Biden administration, it's incentivizing people to stay home. We're paying people to stay home now. We're conditioning people to be reliant on the government. Never happened in the entire time my parents have owned Mr. Sudsy Car Wash. It's something they started themselves, built from the ground up. And that is the case, unfortunately, around the country for a lot of small business owners, as though it wasn't bad enough to get through the entire COVID pandemic when everything was shut down. Now on the other side of it, instead of having a president who's on your side, who wants to incentivize more small business growth and help people get back up and running as businesses, we're telling people just stay home. It's so crazy that this is happening. But I like what you said. You're right. We have to get better representation in Washington, D.C., because we have to have people who are going to push back against this nonsense, who are going to say we actually are standing up for our constituents, for people around the country who we represent. And I know that that's one of the reasons ultimately that you decided to run for Congress, right?
Yes. You know, it takes everyday Americans that really care about the future of the country, and we need new faces and new perspective. You know, under President Trump, and even before that, when he was then candidate Trump, he was really able to grow the base in a profound way. You know, there are people of all different demographics. It didn't matter where you came from, what nationality you were. If you're an American, you know, he had your back, exactly like you said, and the policies were right there beside you, impacting everybody. And ultimately, we need that now. We need better representation. Our districts change. We need to grow our base, get more millennials on our side, get people back to work, and understand that conservative Republican values are ultimately defending liberty. Look at what's happening with our individual liberties being stripped away constantly, and ultimately preserve our economic system, which allows companies like our parents and we as individual people as well to thrive. That's the American dream at its finest, and we need to preserve that. What AOC and the progressives and even some of the RINOs want for our country is a complete tyranny. I mean, we're heading into a really tough direction that if we don't steer the ship fast, we are going to look like countries like Venezuela and Central America.
That's true. It's so true. By the way, you actually, I want people to understand whose seat you are actually running for and who you are primarying. Speaking of RINOs, it's Adam Kinzinger, right?
Yes, it is. The biggest of them all.
Let's talk a minute. Can I just say that maybe my favorite performance, and I'll call it that, of his, was when he broke down in tears in front of Congress, couldn't help himself, was just overcome so much. It's so ridiculous. The show that these people put on every single day, it's obvious that it is for them and it has nothing to do with actually serving the American people, which is ultimately your job if you are a member of Congress. How has this been? Have you kind of have you felt any blowback from him? Because you've been very outspoken about primarying him and the fact that you think he's doing a terrible job in Congress, which he is.
He absolutely is. And he is exactly the reason why we need everyday Americans to take over and bring our country back where it belongs. He is a career politician. This guy has not been in the district for the entire time that he's been in Congress. He loves the MSNBC, CNN, bashing President Trump. That gives him some sort of, boost in ego rather than doing his job and serving his constituents. This district went for President Trump by 5 points. This is a Trump Republican district here in Illinois, and our voices have long been forgotten, especially from people like Adam Kinzinger, who clearly is enabling the Democrats, again, bashing President Trump, using his platform for those reasons instead of actually doing what he should be doing, which is providing the right leadership for his constituents and being a lion on our values and our interests. He has not been doing that. We're taking him on, and we've received actually an overwhelming amount of support because he is Nancy Pelosi's favorite Republican, and ultimately the people are so sick of people like Adam Kinzinger.
Gosh, I couldn't imagine a title I might want less than Nancy Pelosi's favorite Republican. I mean, count me out. Please never give me that accolade because I'm not looking for it. I know you aren't either. I want to talk about your mom for a second because you are a first generation American. Your mom came here, you just talked about her, from Central America, from Guatemala. What did you know about her story when you were growing up? Because, I mean, she really is the face of the American dream. She came here legally, which is something that we love to hear about as Americans. What did you know when you were growing up? Did you know sort of what a big deal it was for her to come here to America?
Absolutely. She worked really hard to be here. She worked 3 jobs, learned English at night, all minimum wage jobs, wanted to learn English, tried to have every opportunity that she could find, whether it was educational or other jobs, to just succeed. She, unfortunately, I grew up with stories with her watching people be murdered in front of her because they were outspoken against the government, rations, bread lines, things like that, that ultimately, America was always the beacon of hope for my family. And I'll give you just 2 quick personal stories. When I was about 5 years old, we went to Guatemala, and before that, when we were packing our things, my mom had clothes and shoes and pencils and all these different, little items to take. And I'm like, Mom, we're just going for a couple of days. Why are we taking all this stuff? And we ultimately went to a little remote school in the middle of nowhere in Guatemala. And she said, well, you know what, I'll show you. If you don't want these and if you don't appreciate this, there are people that do. And when we went to this school, we, I saw kids my age that had barely shoes to walk in. I mean, their little feet were tattered and torn, and they didn't have pencils to write with. And we passed them all out, and they felt so elated by just a pencil. And that really inspired not only my sister and I, our everyday life of saying, wow, we live in the greatest country in the world, and that really impacted us. But ultimately, to give back, we created a school in Guatemala through the Pencils of Promise program. And my mom has, just always instilled in us that you have no idea what you have here until you see it. And then just a second story, I was not good in school by any means. I was, a bad kid. My parents had no idea what to do with me. So they shipped me off to school in Central America. And they're like, you know what, you want to know what it's like to go to school in a foreign country and live there? We'll show you. And then you'll come back recognizing what you have. And I lived there, and it was so sad. I mean, it's poverty. You can't go to a store, and here you can get whatever you want, whatever brand you want. Over there, it's incredibly primitive. And I remember the kids telling me, like, why are you coming here to school? We would die to go to any public school in the United States. And I, came back with such a new perspective. I've always been appreciative of where we came from, but it's not until you live it and see it for yourself that you really have that impact. So, growing up with those stories, and again, my mom working so hard to get to where she is, and now seeing kind of this country go in the wrong direction is very hard for people, immigrants especially, who did it the right way, to see the chaos and to see what's going on. It's a very kind of a slap in the face to a lot of, again, immigrants who did it the right way and came here for something greater.
Wow, it is so true, and it is such a profound point. I mean, I feel like I say it to my kids, if they don't want to eat whatever I've made for them for dinner and they're getting cranky about that, I'm like, you know what? There are kids, we all say it, there are people that would die to have this food, that would feel so lucky to have what you have. But there is an entire generation of Americans, and maybe more than a generation. I think we're all guilty of taking for granted what we have here in this country. What an incredible experience that must have been for you to go and live there, to see exactly why we have everything going for us here in America, and why we don't want to let go of that. I really do think that first generation Americans tend to believe in our country the most because they're aware of what it's like not to be in America. They know what we have here, and it's so special, and it's something that needs to be preserved. Gosh, I wish everyone had the opportunity to see firsthand like you did, because I just feel like there are so many people that think America owes them something. Like, well, I'm owed everything. You should be grateful that I'm here. No, you should be grateful that you live in the freest country in the entire world, in a place that has more opportunity than anywhere else. And your mom, my gosh, is such an example of that. I mean, this is the American dream, right? She worked super hard, obviously, and that's the whole point of the American dream. You can work as hard as you can, and you can be whatever you want if you put everything you have into it here in America. What an incredible story. And I'm sure that you keep that with you, every single day as you're running for this position. Do you still have family in Guatemala, by the way?
Yes, we do. And again, things are not it's not America, and it's not the same as it was, even 20, 30 years ago. The literacy rate it's not where it needs to be. There's no innovation, hard to find jobs. And I wanted to also express that, here in our country, we've had our own challenges. I grew up with stories of my grandfather, being in the Great Depression and World War II. And those stories, it's just amazing to me that we've lost kind of what made us special, and all of the challenges that how we've grown as a country, that my generation, and the younger ones even after, just maybe those stories are getting lost. And I hope that everybody can share their own stories and how their families, got to where they are, so they do appreciate that. And those are a constant reminder of how good we have it here presently.
So true. So your family that lives in Guatemala, were they paying attention when our Vice President Kamala Harris went down there to find the root causes of illegal immigration? And did you get any feedback on the great trip she had down there?
That's a great question. And we did receive a lot of feedback, and I'll tell you exactly why. For a long time, especially under Democratic administrations, they will dole out so much cash to all these governments that ultimately just fuels more corruption. That money is not going to the people down there to solve economic problems. Though that money is our taxpayer money, is going directly to fund not only the corruption in the governments, but ultimately the cartels and these NGOs that nobody really knows what all of that is going towards. And so for our people down there, they're like, oh, come on, America's giving us more money. Well, we've never seen it for the last, decades upon decades. So, this money is just going to our government and not going to do much anyway. So it's embarrassing, the leadership, especially the way that she speaks, and just her lack of leadership is just the only way that
on both fronts, by the way, from both of them. There is zero leadership, Catalina, happening at all in Washington, D.C. I mean, it is just like a free-for-all. Like somebody just let a 5-year-old take over the government and said, like, just do whatever you want. Nothing has to make sense. We don't need to follow the Constitution. I mean, if we were following the laws of the land, my goodness, our southern border would not be fully open and allowing, at this point, over almost 1.5 million people that have been apprehended so far this year. I mean, it's just as though, like, there are just no rules, right? I mean, if Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are in charge, anybody could do what they want. In fact, I would say that Americans, people that are actual citizens of this country, are having a much harder time and being penalized by our leaders, and I use that word very loosely, whereas anybody that wants to just walk over our southern border, I mean, my goodness, you get transported wherever you want. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris campaign on the fact that they're going to give you free health care. We know that once you get here, they're not going to send you back. So maybe that's the route everybody ought to start taking, and everybody is.
Exactly. And that's why President Trump's policies were so effective, right? Because when you incentivize people and you campaign on those incentivizations, they're going to take advantage of that. The cartel, the people that want to ultimately exploit what's going on with our vulnerabilities, and exactly like you mentioned, the American people are who is ultimately, we're the ones that pay for it, both economically and from a law and order perspective. Everybody always says, how is things like immigration reform and the border, how is that something that that people in Illinois care about? And ultimately, if you saw a couple months ago with New York, where they were handing out, hotel rooms and healthcare and jobs and whatever you want. Oh, come up to New York State and we'll provide everything for you. It's the same in Democrat-run states like Illinois when you have these sanctuary cities. It ultimately is at the expense of the American people and in our safety and security.
And it's just so infuriating. I feel like the Democrats know that they're in trouble in 22. I feel like they are terrified. I don't think they've ever been in modern America this nervous about a midterm election year, and they ought to be, because what they have very clearly shown is that when you put a Democrat in charge of the White House, when the Democrats control the Senate and the House, then they'll just take down America. I mean, they are single-handedly every single day destroying our country. And I think people have had it. I think there are people every day, Catalina, that wake up, and maybe, I don't know that there are 81 million of them out there, but people that voted for Joe Biden are having major buyer's remorse. People that have been lifelong Democrats are seeing things like what you just said, where the American taxpayers are footing the bill for illegal immigrants every day. We're sending $83 trillion worth of military equipment, just leaving it over there for the terrorists in Afghanistan. It is crazy that this is happening in America and how quickly it's happened. So I think that 22 is going to be a huge year for Republicans. What's your sense, especially in your state? What do you feel?
You're spot on. We have seats here that have long been Democrat and they're competitive now. People are so sick of the lockdowns, the lies. You know, when President Trump was in office, the media was fanning the flames. They were creating the problems because ultimately we were seeing success on the ground with businesses thriving,
right?
The worker back
Things
to work.
Were working.
Right, exactly. The president was solving problems. He was a problem solver.
And they don't like that much in Washington, D.C.
They don't. They want government to solve the problems. And now you have government creating the problems and media, carrying water for them ultimately. And it's really hurting the everyday Americans. The lockdowns were huge out here in a very blue state. COVID, we have businesses that still are not up and running. Look at what's happening again with your family over there in North Carolina. And it's going to be a national problem. I think economically, people are going to vote with their pocketbooks and see just the vast difference between the Trump administration and what the current administration now, but also everything with COVID and people not being able to actually access information or speak their mind. Censorship is a huge problem. I have friends, people here on the ground that they never were involved in politics until they saw things like President Trump getting kicked off of Twitter or what's going on now with, the vaccines almost being mandated in a lot of the different companies or the states. Our individual liberties are being chipped away at. And I think ultimately people see that this is going to be an incredibly important election cycle that, elections have consequences, as we've seen. Let's try to reverse it now and go back to where we should be in preserving what we have.
Yeah, let's have some good consequences for once. I'm going to make a prediction right now, since we know how vital 2022 will be, since I think the Democrats know that we're going to flip the House and the Senate. I am going to predict that COVID-19 lasts a really long time, that we're going to be too nervous, Catalina, to vote actually at a polling location. We're going to need to mail out the ballots again in 2022. I am predicting they're going to do the same thing that they did in 2020, and we know that nobody knew what happened with a lot of those ballots. I don't know, anybody that thinks it's legitimate to have ballots in a suitcase, but who am I to say? We're going to get fact checked for that, and I can't wait for it. But honestly, they're going to keep playing this out. Isn't it interesting that we have a variant coming up here? Well, the reality is it was 15 days to slow the spread. I don't want to get off on a tangent here, but I'm so irritated by all of this because people are done. People are so done. You either got vaccinated or you're not going to, and you're willing to live with those consequences. And if you're vaccinated, then you should feel safe. Wear a mask if it makes you feel better, but we've got to get back to life. We've got to get back to having legitimate and safe elections that people actually believe in. They're going to try and play this out, I guarantee it, until not just after Election Day, at least in 2022, because they know that the Republicans are going to win. I don't feel, don't feel a need to comment on that. I just had to get it out of my system because the writing is on the wall and everybody can see it. Why are they continuing to talk about COVID as much as they are? Well, we know they want to distract from the border. We know they want to distract from Afghanistan and the disaster that was. They want to distract from the fact that our oldest ally, France, just took their ambassadors out of America, an unprecedented move, because they are so embarrassed by our country and by our leader at this point. So COVID-19, they're going to play it out. If you have any thoughts on that, feel free. But if not, I do ask everybody what you think is the best part of America and what you think is the biggest threat to the future of our country.
Yes. I wanted to comment quickly on with all the COVID being another year's worth of media coverage and scare tactics, right? You know, here in Illinois, we say vote early and vote often. It is a running joke at how bad the corruption is. Illinoisans don't trust Republicans or Democrats. They don't trust either of them equally. Our governors have gone to jail. It's not uncommon to get, 6 ballots to your home of one or two people, and to claim that all of this is just conspiratorial, or that we're, the crazies that, people like Adam Kinzinger talk about his constituents in the base as, is completely false. And ultimately, we need to have safe and secure elections. Exactly like you mentioned, Lara, like the amount of disenchantment and the real threat to our republic when people do not believe that our elections are fair and the integrity of them. Back to kind of where my mom came from, there's no point in voting in countries like that, because you know who's going to win.
That's a joke.
Exactly. And we get to that point now, which we're already at that point in a lot of ways. We need to solve this problem fast. And I'm so encouraged by a lot of the states that are at least implementing a lot of these laws to make sure that we have safe and secure elections moving forward. So that was just that one comment there. And
no, thank you.
To your question on best part about America, our free enterprise system, hands down. Ultimately, one of my favorite books is Free to Choose. And our individual liberties, when you talk about the culture wars and the wokeism, AOC in the squad and the progressivism, I believe that they're using that as a tool to ultimately undermine our economic system, right? When you're looking at things like the trillion dollar Green New Deals and her platform, and using Twitter and trying to be cute at the Met Gala, ultimately it's her policies that are attacking what we stand for as a country and our free enterprise system. Again, coming from a small business and understanding just how important it is for innovation and small businesses to thrive, for all Americans to thrive. The capitalism is essential. It's what makes our country different. And ultimately, we are able to have that because of our individual liberties, because of our Constitution. And if we don't fight on both fronts, both will be lost. So ultimately, that's the greatest part, but also the biggest threat is this Marxism, the Keynesian ideology, the culture wars, the cancel culture. It's all after the same thing, which is ultimate government control, both economically and ultimately individually.
Yeah, and it's not an exaggeration to say that. I feel like some people that don't really pay attention to politics that much, they'll hear this kind of on the periphery, and then they'll be like, I mean, it's so extreme to say that America is headed in the direction of a socialist country or communism. No, it's not. It is not extreme at all, because it's exactly what you just said. When you talk about AOC, when you talk about the leadership now of the Democrat Party, they've been very open about it. They're democratic socialists. They call themselves what they are. They want that for America. You ask any person who has lived in a socialist or communist country, whether they like capitalism or they like socialism better, every single time, 100% guaranteed, they will always pick capitalism, because they have seen the failure of the other way. They have seen that socialism never works in any country in which it's been implemented in the history of the world. It does not work, and it ultimately leads to the downfall of countries. And we are on a very slippery slope right now in the United States. But it's why I love to see young, ambitious conservatives like you out there, because you truly get it. You truly are a great messenger. I think that, we're fighting truly for the future of America here. And it's for my kids. It's for future generations to come. We have to preserve the greatest country in the world, the freest country in the world. And as you referenced, the beacon of hope for so many other countries and people around the world who do not have, they don't get to live here. They don't have the same opportunities in their country as we do here in America. So Love to see you out there fighting the good fight. Thank you for that. Keep it up. Before we let you go, I want to make sure our viewers know how they can get involved with your campaign.
Yeah, head to CatalinaForCongress.com and Catalina Lauf on all social media platforms. We are creating a grassroots army, have a lot of support nationally as well to take the RINO out here, out of office, of course. And
you got to be specific with that, because I mean, you know, they'll try and say that you said something else.
Exactly. Yes, very peacefully. And so Catalina Lauf, CatalinaForCongress.com on all social media platforms.
Amazing, amazing. Well, Catalina, thank you for joining us here on The Right View. Good luck with everything. We're going to keep our eye on you. I think you have a very bright future ahead. Good luck with the business. I hope that, you know, we can get some supplies, we can get some workers here in America, but with the current situation, probably unlikely. So thank you to Catalina. And as always, thank you to everybody who tuned in. We'll see you back here next time for more of The Right View.